Good morning, everyone. This is Steve Albert from Passport USA. I'm here with,
This is John Dawson
from Passport USA as well. This morning we're going to be talking a little bit about a quick overview of visa options, what's going on in the visa world regarding working in the United States. We'll principally be focused our conversations this morning on therapists, both occupational and physical therapists. First off, let me tell you, there has not been a lot of successful movements in the visitor visa arena. As you're all aware, historically, we used to be able to get visitor visas fairly regularly to take the month, and all 5 were denied. There was a meeting, I can tell you, about 2 weeks ago in Manila with State Department officials. We are also working with the Indian Ambassador's Office to try to get some movement on this. We're all members of the American Association of International Healthcare Recruitment. We're trying to put some pressure on this, but right now I can tell you the solution looks like it's EB2s or H1Bs for the near future, and that's where we're is current. We're on EB2 basics. Physical therapy is currently treated as a shortage occupation. That's important for both, that's critical right now, and it means that physical therapists can get these visas much quicker than occupational therapists. So if you have the opportunity, this is the window's open now, and we should be pursuing these aggressively. They can be filed before. Oftentimes, we're bringing our candidates over on an H1B and then filing an EB2 for them. The EB2 filing by itself has the effect of extending the H1B's right to work here in the United States. Pros and cons of the EB2s, well, I alluded to one just a minute ago. It's not available to Indians. It's not. It is available, but there's a 4 or 5 year wait. The second challenge is that it's not as effective for occupational therapists, just because the timing cannot be issued promptly. But the pros are that, one, this is really what most of our therapists that we work with are after in the long term, is getting the right to work in the United States indefinitely. The other advantage, as many of you know, it relates to family issues. The EB2s can be filed on behalf of your family members as well, allowing them to work here in the United States. Let's talk briefly about, Andrew, you were right. I jumped around here. Let's talk about H1Bs. Let's go back to H1B basics. The difference between capped and non-capped H1Bs. This isn't as important as it used to be. Today we issue in the United States 65,000 H1Bs. In prior years, those 65,000 were getting used up in a day or two. In today's economic climate, we still probably, John and I were trying to peg that number. John, what do you guess we've got left right now?
I think the last figures we saw was somewhere around 18,000.
Had been consumed, so we still got 40,000. Yeah. So John and I would guess, this year that we probably still have EB2 or H1Bs available through this year. Would you guess,
yeah.
John?
Yeah, I think through the end of this year
and possibly in the next year. Okay. The pros and cons of the H1B are that family members, can't work. That's a huge con to this. a pro to it. We've got a number of candidates that say, get me an H1B because it's so much faster right now than a green card and EB2. We're typically budgeting about 8 months for a EB2 these days, and we're, October. We're budgeting, 8 weeks, for an H1B once they become current. So in August, we're bringing people in 8 weeks after we filed. Andrew, maybe you could skip ahead past our EB2 basics that I already touched on, and let's talk a little bit about visa screen certificates. 3 key components: educational equivalency. John, you want to say a word? I know you've been working a lot with some of the states right now about the difference between coursework tool and 5 and 4. And
sure. Yeah. So anyone coming to the U.S. now to work as a PT or OT will need a visa screen, and visa screens usually last for 5 years. But if you don't currently have a visa screen in place and you need to get a new one, as you see the date on there, 2009, everyone has to meet coursework tool 5, which is the most recent version of all the essentially coursework that you have to have completed to show that your education was the equivalent of a American physical therapist education. Meanwhile, at the same time, every state has standards that might differ from the visa screen standard. The state standards might be a slightly lower standard. A lot of times the states, the rule on this point will say something along the lines of, you will be evaluated based on whatever coursework tool was in effect at the time you graduated. So it might be a prior, coursework. As of today, the coursework is at the master's level from the U.S. point of view.
John, that's what, 90 professional credits and 60 general credits? Is
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. You also need to, for a visa screen certificate, proof of foreign licensure. In India, that's waived effectively because we don't have national licensure or state licensure in India. Also, TOEFL, you have to meet the minimum visa screen standards. I can also tell you the one thing that we're seeing kind of an increasing number of is candidates that are from offshore that have got a U.S. master's degree in one discipline or the other, and that TOEFL requirement is waived for them.
This is Andrew Lingo, the Director of Marketing here, and I just thought this would be a good point to maybe bring up an important topic that Steve or John could address. I do a lot of work on Facebook and the forums, and especially when I'm seeing postings by Indian therapists, and there's so many people that are so excited about getting a credential evaluation for New York or Michigan. And I thought maybe this would be a good spot to discuss maybe the limitations of that credentialing that you might encounter as you try to come to the United States.
Yeah, that's a good point, Andrew. Unfortunately, what we see some candidates doing is pursuing licensure in a state like New York that currently will have a educational standard that is below coursework tool 5. And unfortunately, we get many candidates coming to us saying, hey, is the next step for you to get me a job? Do you have jobs in New York? Which we have some. And am I ready to go? And the problem is that after July 1st, 2009, in order to get a visa screen, which you'll need for either an EB2 or an H1B visa, you'll have to meet the coursework tool 5 standard. So you might have a license in New York that you got since July 1st, 2009, but you can't get here to the United States on an EB2 or an H1B because you've got to meet coursework tool 5 for the visa screen standard. John, do you have comments on that at all? Or?
Yeah, I would just reiterate what you said, and just obviously the main thing you would have to do is to get some additional course remediation to enable you to meet that higher coursework tool 5 standard. So again, and pretty much from now on, unless you already have a valid visa screen in effect, you're going to have to be able to meet that coursework tool 5 standard.
I'm sorry, I have one more thing. This is Andrew Lingo again. One more thing I think that I see a lot on the forums I think is important to address. And this applies a lot to Philippines candidates. I see a lot of Filipinos that are working in Middle Eastern countries that maybe aren't local board passers, but have licensure in like UAE or Saudi Arabia. Do you guys have any suggestions on a course of action to help them? Do they need to go get their local board?
Yeah, you know, I don't know that answer off the top of my head. I think that you need a licensure in the, I mean, John, you know,
I think it differs by state. I've seen different states that will, you know, some states will say that, you know, you need to be licensed in whatever country you were educated in. Other states do not have that requirement.
And then the visa screen standards, I think I'm just not sure. Probably, I would think, I don't know the answer to that. If you haven't passed the Philippines boards and you were educated in the Philippines, whether that would meet the visa screen standard. I can tell you, look on our Facebook page or look on our web page. John and I will be running that down after we get off this call.
Well, thank you guys. Those are questions I had in advance of the questions that you guys attending can ask at the end. Thank you guys.
One thing that's a little bit new is that we've, let me get on the right page. Okay, student visa context. We're seeing a growing number of students, foreign educated undergraduates that are coming here for master's degrees in the U.S. and they're coming optional practical training. And optional practical training allows you to work full-time for 12 months after you graduate for purposes of visa screen, or for purposes of the visa screen certificate. You don't need a visa screen certificate to work on an F visa here, an optional practical training. The employment, however, must be related to your major course of study. On the next page, a few years ago, in a new development, there's been a 17-month extension for optional practical training. So theoretically, we've got some graduates of master's programs here in the United States that are able to work 29 months, on optional practical training after they finish a U.S. master's degree. I can tell you there is a little bit of finesse in here, and there are certain designated science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs and degrees that qualify for this additional 17 months. I can tell you physiology and exercise physiology, are a slam dunk that they would qualify. It's not a slam dunk that a master's in physical therapy would meet the STEM requirements. And what I'm seeing just at 50,000 feet is that this kind of varies by educational institution. And it's the responsible officer's office that's making the call on this. Just a heads up, it's something if you're pursuing a master's in physical therapy, you might want to touch base with your student advisory services early, your international students office, to try to get a feel whether they would grant OPT, because they're the ones who actually do the filing and grant this, versus exercise physiology, probably kinesiology would qualify as well for this 29 months. And I think some of this confusion or this nuanced approach right now is just because this is a fairly new law that responsible officers at schools are just beginning to interpret. And I can tell you, again, at the macro level, I'm seeing that this is being applied inconsistently amongst educational institutions. So something for you to keep your eyes open for. Of course, it's important to keep in that F1 status. Normally, a student is going to want to transfer to either an H1B or an EB2 when that 12 months or 29 months is coming up to an end. Historically, there was a problem, and the problem was that usually H-1Bs would run out in April, and if a student had graduated the following year in May, for example, and his OPT was finishing the following May, potentially he would have the problem that if he didn't file an H-1B, he wouldn't be getting it until the following year. But even if he had filed an H-1B timely in April of the year his OPT was running out, he wouldn't get it issued until October. The problem being that he's got 60 days grace period after his OPT concludes, but then after that, if he was remaining in the United States, he'd be out of status. So a number of years ago, the Immigration Service recognized this problem and created kind of an additional grace period, or a cap gap that we call it. And what you need to do is, if you're on optional practical training, is to file your H-1B before your optional practical training is up, and by edict, effectively, your status will continue until October, when your H-1B is actually issued. But make sure that you're doing this well in advance, that you're planning this. Interface with your student services office, international students offices. But there is protections out there. I just mentioned it briefly as an item that we frequently have to coach our candidates on. Quick overview of our Passport USA program. My marketing man wouldn't let me get away without pitching our program a little bit. We continue to have great opportunities for both physical and occupational therapists in a variety of settings: outpatient hospitals, skilled nursing, and many home health. We continue to sponsor both EB2s and H1Bs. We are not relying on the visitor visas being fixed in the short term. We continue to hire a number of students or graduates on occupational practical training. As you work with us, you'll learn more about how we really cover most of the costs of helping you become eligible to work in the United States, including visa screen, licensure costs, payment of visa filings, etc. Well, thanks, everyone. This is supposed to be a short seminar today. I'm sorry we've got off to a slow start. We're going to spend just a couple minutes on questions. Get just a few. We're bringing them up now. I live in India. I've got a master's in PT. I've applied to New York and credentialed in New York. That's good. You could also get approved to take the MPTE. You don't have a visa screen. The step that John and I were coaching there is that while you have your New York license and you'll have the ability to take the test under New York, what you need to do is be able to get here. And right now, if you're coming from India, the way we see that path would be on an H-1B. So what we would do with our candidates is file an H-1B for you. We would probably, John, get them either there's two strategies. One, we'd find you a job in New York. You'd be able to use your New York license to get your H-1B to pop, or we would get you a job in one of our temporary license states that would allow you to get your H-1B to pop.
You might need some remediation for the visa.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. And again, if you're coming from India, typically, if you don't have a visa screen now, you're going to need to meet that 90 professional credits, which you ordinarily will, but you also need 60 general credits, which it's rare that we see Indian transcripts that meet that. We've got, the good news is we've got a couple educational partners in India that can get you those general credits, or even if you need some additional science credits. And consistently, our our partners over there are getting people, up to 30 credits as quickly as 2 or 3 months, potentially as long as 6 months. Medical technologist, should I take AMT or ASCP and TOEFL to get a visa screen? Medical technologists. Medical technologists are a little different in that not all states here are going to require a license. So if we get back to the basic visa screen requirements, you're going to need a educational equivalency. You're going to need to prove that up. You're going to need to prove that you've got a foreign license in the country that you were educated, and you're going to need to meet the TOEFL. I can tell you on a practical matter, all of our clients want to see ASCP or prefer seeing ASCP certification. But John and I will post it. I'm not sure technically if you would need ASCP or AMT to get a visa screen, but John and I will post that on the webpage and Facebook in the next early next week and let you know the answer to that question, which I think is, hey, do I have to have one of these certifications to get visa screen? I can tell you for our clients, they require it to work for them, but I don't know the answer off the top of my head for a visa screen certificate. Which is currently a master's degree in the United States. Now remember, in the Philippines, many PTs and OTs are getting on their diploma a baccalaureate, or it says a bachelor's of science. The United States, however, is interpreting those because at the PT level, that's 150 credits as the equivalent of a U.S. master's degree. I hope we answered that question.
There's a question about limited permits. Should I?
Go ahead. Go ahead and repeat the question and give the answer.
So we have a question, it looks like, also asking about someone who's heard about limited permits but didn't know much about it. Just a little bit more information. There are some states that allow both American and foreign physical therapists to work on a temporary license. And what this essentially means is these are individuals who have completed all the steps of the application process. The only thing they haven't done is taken and passed the NPTE. So this temporary license allows you to work. We're doing a lot in states like New Mexico and Texas. Texas allows you to work for 3 months, New Mexico for up to 6 months, and you're only eligible if you have not, if you haven't already taken the NPTE yet. If you take the NPTE and fail the NPTE, your temporary license is no longer valid. And then another key condition of that is you have to work under the supervision of another physical therapist. But it just it's another opportunity to allow someone from the Philippines or India. You'd probably be coming on an H1B in this route as well, but it allows you to get over here sooner and already start working as you prepare for the NPTE.
Another question I see up there is a question, I think it's directed really to Passport USA, and it's saying, EB2s, H1Bs, how do we decide what we're going to offer someone? I think it changes during the time of the year, to be perfectly honest with you. We had historically looked at, had a higher standard before we would issue an EB2 although we have offered EB2s to some of our candidates. They said, you know, Steve, John, Andrew, I'd really like to get here faster than waiting 8 months. Could you get me here on an H1B? So I can't give you a hard and fast rule right now. I can tell you we're doing both. The time of the year has some impact on it, as if H1Bs are readily available as they are now. We try to get people here as quickly as possible, but if somebody said that they absolutely needed an EB2, I think we would consider those candidates year-round. Another question is, I'm here on a F1 visa. I'm going to take H1. I'm going to take NPT in September or October. I passed TOEFL. I'm waiting for my visa screen results. Can I be sponsored for a EB2? I believe that we would start processing you for. We have processed candidates in your situation now for an EB2, and you don't have to prove up that visa screen until that EB2 is close to being issued. You've got to prove it up, as I remember. You've got to show a license and a visa screen at the time that visa is going to be issued. So in theory, you could get filed and sponsored in advance.
Would Edmund be a good candidate to even start now, being on an F1? Would he qualify for the CAP, or could he?
Yeah, that would be another strategy. Another strategy might be an H1B. Another strategy, Edmund, would be, you know, we talked about optional practical training. I wonder if you have optional practical training available now. And another strategy, just to throw another thought in here, student here on an F1 would be what John was talking about, a temporary license. Hey, you might want to get 6 months of work experience under your belt before you take that NPTE. And John has opportunities for you to work here now in states that offer temporary licenses, so you can start working and then take the NPT. You could probably give yourself some more time if you wanted to take that exam in December. Edmund, I'm just throwing that out to you. GRPT, even if they're not licensed in their country of origin. That question appears like it might be coming from India, and since India doesn't have a national licensure scheme, the visa screen recognizes that fact. And yes, we would hire people even if they didn't have a license from a country that doesn't have licenses. The next question,
this is back to Edmund. It sounds like, and then addressing that question, it sounds like, you know, if you were to contact us, we can get you probably in touch with some clients pretty quickly prior to you even having to pass the NPTE. So if you want to contact Katie Glazer, send us your resume if you've not done so already. We're glad to hear from you.
Yeah, another question about a Filipino here in the United States that didn't pass, didn't take or potentially pass the local boards in the Philippines. A question about, to get a visa screen, would we need to go back to the home country, take the boards and get a local license? I think, John, in this case, they probably would.
Yeah.
The visa screen.
And also a lot of states require that as well. So it would be.
Question about schools that were not WFOT recognized. The good news is that MBCOT, as we mentioned earlier, does recognize WFOT schools for purposes of credentials evaluations, and it's really a slam dunk if you graduated from one of those schools. But if you didn't graduate from a school that is WFOT recognized, you can still get a credentials evaluation of that to see if you meet WFOT standards. So it's just a little bit longer step, maybe an additional step, but if you're an OT, you can still get here to the United States even if it wasn't a WFOT school. I'm licensed in the Philippines and Saudi Arabia. I'm currently practicing in a hospital in Jeddah. How am I to file for a visa to take the NPTE? In this case, you know, right now, when we're talking about coming to the United States to take the NPTE, historically, most candidates came over on a visitor visa, but I can tell you, everyone is having problems getting those right now. So my thought would be that you would want to try to come over here, find a sponsor, and come over here either on an EB2 or an H1B to take the NPT exam. So what you're going to need to do is find a sponsor out there. I already have a visa screen. Will it qualify me to work in the United States? It's great that you have a visa screen. What you also need to do is get a state license, in many states you can either get you a temporary license before you take the NPTE, or we can get you a permanent license after you take the NPTE. I'm a TOEFL passer. Its validity is for 2 years. That's correct. Visa screen requires TOEFL. If I passed ENDICOT exam, the 2 years have already passed. Do I need to retake the TOEFL and pass it again to qualify for the visa screen processing? I think, John, what they're saying is that they don't have a visa screen yet, and they took the TOEFL, over 2 years ago. The TOEFL's expired, and they would need another TOEFL to get a visa screening certificate, unfortunately.
Yeah,
John,
that's correct.
Do you have any different than I do?
No, yeah, if it's been more than 2 years, then yes, yeah, they would need to take TOEFL again, get a passing score.
Okay, question. So you could, do those 12 months a year. Do OTs have a limited license too, like PTs? You're asking two guys that live and die with this stuff every day, and you've asked us another question that we don't know the answer to. We'll try to put that on our website, and in the next day or so, we'll let you know about that as well. We don't get that question as often, just because the ENDICOT is offered, at international sites throughout the world. But we'll run that question down for you. EB2s generally filed towards the end of REB. Yeah, that's a great question here. And normally, what we do here at Passport USA is we bring candidates over on H1Bs initially, and then after a year of satisfactory job performance with us, we'll offer to file their EB2s for them. So what we're looking for in exchange for that is, number one, when we bring them over on H1B, we're looking for them to make a 2-year commitment to us. After a year, and they would like us to file an EB2 on their behalf, we ask them for an additional year. So we look for a 3-year commitment, but we do file EB2s, and that's right. That's exactly what we would do. We would file that EB2 before the H1B expired. The other strategy would be that you could extend your H1B, but that's another strategy. It's just one we don't employ.
And I just want to point out on that comment that Steve is correct, and that's our standard program, but there are exceptions to every rule. Especially if you're a candidate in the United States, graduating from a U.S. master's program, we might look at that candidate differently. So we're here to make a successful win-win solution for us, the employer, and yourself as a physical or occupational therapist. So please discuss any of this with us, and I'm sure that we can come to something that's a win-win for everyone.
Another question up there, thanks for shedding some light on the limited permit. Yeah, I think this is something that a lot of people probably aren't that aware of. but there are a number of states in the United States, as John said earlier, that'll issue a license. John, you were looking at Texas yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
How long is there? Shed some light on, the Texas and maybe New Mexico as
okay.
well.
Yeah, New Mexico, their temporary licenses will last up to a maximum of 6 months. Texas, it's kind of strange wording. It's not quite. It's actually, I guess, technically a little longer than 3 months, because they say whatever month your temporary license is issued, it expires at the end of whatever month it is 3 months afterwards. So say you got a temp license in the beginning of October, that temporary license would be good until the end of January. But your temporary license will finish sooner if you take the MPTE and do not pass the MPTE. I mean, really, one of two things are going to happen when you take the MPTE. If you pass, at that point, you'll be eligible for permanent licensure. If you do not pass, then you will no longer be able to have your temporary license.
And just to reiterate, John, you don't have to take the NPTE to get those temporary licenses. Is that right?
That's correct. You need to have every other step completed. TOEFL, your visa screen, your state licensure application complete. So every single thing out, every other step has to be completed. The only thing that doesn't is taking the MPTE.
And you can come on either an H1B or an EB2 on a temporary.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, how long is the approval of a H1B visa, and what are the requirements? Well, the H1Bs this year will start being issued in October of this year. What you need to do is get those applications for that H1B in at least 8 weeks before, October, and you'll be right on pace. Now, you asked about the requirements for the H1B. Just getting back, what we need is a visa screen, and again, under the visa screen, we need to pass TOEFL. We need to have our credentials evaluated. And if you're in India, you don't need to worry about the local license. If you're in the Philippines, you do have to have that step. And then for an H1B, you do have to prove up a license. So you probably want to get a license that does not require you to take the MPTE, or in the alternative, you can get a letter from a state saying that all of your the requirements of a license are met, but for taking the MPTE. Can I take the MPTE under an H1B visa? Yeah, that's a nice. It's a good question, and this is kind of the circular. And I think we tried to answer it right there. Is that there's two ways to get that H1B visa. One is to get a license in a temporary licensure state. You also need a job in that state as well. The other way to do it is to get a job in one of those states and a letter from that State Board of Physical Therapy saying that you have met all the requirements for licensure, but for taking the NPTE. I already have a visa screen and IELTS and AMT, but every time I apply, agents always ask me if I have ASCP. So what's the difference between the license? Both are for U.S. licensure. Julie, in the United States, there are roughly, as I remember, about a dozen states that require licenses for medical technologists. So that means most states don't. Employers might say, as many of ours do, that they want to see the ASCPI. But technically, you could come to the United States on an H-1B visa with AMT certification. You're just going to have to find the right state, the right employer, the right time. But technically, you've got the boxes checked, but for having the job and the sponsor. Another question about non-capped H-1Bs. That's correct. They can be filed any time of the year. But again, right now, the challenges with a non-capped H-1B, and perhaps I should have spent some time in the presentation, is that there are only a very limited number of employers that can sponsor you on a non-capped H-1B, and most commonly they have to be affiliated with a educational institution. So right now, because H-1Bs, the capped H-1Bs, are readily available, and every employer can apply for an H-1B under the cap scenario. Overwhelmingly, all of our candidates are going to work for capped employers because the caps aren't applying right now.
It's probably fair to make the assumption that less than 5% of the employers would qualify for the non-cap. And since they're a lot of times teaching institutions, they're having lots of candidates maybe from India that are graduating with masters in physical therapy from their own programs. So when an opportunity opens, it's quite logical to think that they might file a non-capped H-1B for someone graduating from that program. So, Steve was talking about, there's not many opportunities is the biggest issue.
Question about I passed NPTE, but I don't have a license because I don't have a U.S. Social Security number. Will I qualify for an H-1B visa? The answer is yes. But what you'll need, potentially, depending on the state that you get, number. I mean, you can't get one overseas. There are some states that have as a requirement physical presence in the United States or presentation of a Social Security number. You can get your H-1B visa or your EB2 visa to be issued without a Social Security number.
We're running low on time, so we'll try to answer the remaining questions, but I think that's probably all we'll have time for. There's no need to type any more in the question box. We'll address as many as you can in the next few minutes.
Okay. This is the lightning round. How difficult is to get a visitor visa? Very difficult to get a visitor visa right now. But a legitimate strategy that Jonathan is identifying right now is taking the NPTE in Singapore. And John, I don't know off the top of my head if NPTE is issued in Singapore. I'm going to assume that it is, but a legitimate strategy would be to get a visa to Singapore from a country like the Philippines. That's pretty much an open door policy. That's a great idea, Jonathan. You could take it if it is offered in Singapore, which I assume you've done the legwork on that, and take it in Singapore. Good idea. Visitor's visa from India is next to impossible. I agree. Considering I'm a professional and single, what should I do if I want to get here to appear for the NPTE? I think what you're going to need to pursue right now is finding a U.S. sponsor. Is going to be the most promising strategy for you. We are not going down the path right now for the candidates that we represent, even trying to get visitor visas right now. We're putting a backup plan in place for everybody and getting them on an H-1B over here. I think that I know that the tourist visa is a problem. Yes, that's correct. With PTs in the Philippines, yes, that's true. It's also true in India. Schedule an interview. The best thing to say. Okay, what you're trying to do. Why they're denying these visas? We can see at least that. We can see a pattern here. Is that they're saying that you don't have sufficient ties to the Philippines or India to go back, and they're pointing to principally economic ties. So if you can show things like you own a house, that's great. You have a bank account, that's good evidence. You have a job That's good evidence. You have a note from your employer saying that you're going to have a job when you come back. That's good evidence. What they're trying to do is say you've got to have, overwhelming economic stake in coming back to India or the Philippines. I mean, that's the pattern that we're seeing, but it is difficult to establish because those consular offices are not giving you much time to present that argument. So the best thing you can do is try to get those documents into your file. If you're offered that opportunity, what you want to be suggesting to them is, I'm coming back, and I'm coming back because I own a house, I've got kids here, I've got family here, I've got a job here. You've seen my tax return in there, I make good money. You've seen my bank account balance, I've got good money. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry we're running out of time right now. We've enjoyed the opportunity to speak with all of you. We'll be having another webinar coming up usually in a couple weeks to a month. Feel free to email, call with questions. We've got Katie Glazer's contact information on our website. Visit our website. Thanks again for everyone coming. John?
Thank you. And yeah, we'll contact us if you have any more questions.
Bye-bye.